Near Broadway on 49th Street in New York City, the Old Actors Church stands. Should you attend on a Wednesday, Friday, or Sunday night, regardless of the season, I can assure you of an evening that is more than pleasant. It promises to be highly instructive. On these nights, you will hear Neville discuss truth. Neville, a dynamic and handsome man of no more than 36 years, sports a thoroughly disarming and captivating smile. He delivers the truth in a forceful and sincere manner, charged with feeling and reflective of his own integrity and diligence. He communicates passionately from the pulpit. Every night he speaks, the Old Actors Church attracts between 400 and 500 men and women. It's hard to determine the extent of his evident popularity due to his charm as compared to his forceful orations. While some believe it's the former, this does not detract from the value of his teachings. His teaching methods and content are exceptional, and they readily captivate a diverse audience. Still, his readers and listeners must be the judges. One thing's for certain, he draws a crowd, and he satisfies most of them. Neville isn't a Native American. He hails from Barbados in the British West Indies, born into a planter's family in 1905. He felt that a cane sugar plantation wasn't the place for him. He yearned for a broader platform for imaginative flight and spiritual understanding. At the young age of 17, Neville journeyed to the U.S. to study drama. Notably, he later penned a book titled A Man's Faith is His Fortune, showcasing his boundless self-belief as he embarked upon the unknown potential of a career in foreign land. His confidence served him well, bringing him to a place of public recognition. Future pursuits of greater achievements and fame undoubtedly await him. In 1925, Neville launched his theatrical career at the Hippodrome, a once prominent New York landmark that has since been demolished. Its destruction marked a significant turn in Neville's life, coinciding with his departure from the theater. He switched to a different public life, though it held certain similarities with his former dramatic career. Neville, a young man, has cultivated diverse experiences. In 1925, he voyaged to England with a dancing partner and explored extensively. During this journey, his interest in studying the occult and mysticism was evoked. While in England, he met Arthur Begbie, who introduced him to psychical research, giving Neville a first-hand experience of a spiritualistic seance. Despite his distaste for its atmosphere and process, he was sure he'd embarked on a long journey. After returning to America in 1926 to resume his theatrical career, his interest in mysticism sharpened, coinciding with a diminishing interest in the theater. It's vital to underscore that Neville was successful in the dramatic sphere. His exit from theater to metaphysics was not due to failure. On the contrary, there were times he earned a theatrical salary of $500 per week, proving his success. Knowing this is crucial, as it counters the common misconception that metaphysics is a domain exclusive to failures and life dyspeptics. Around this time, he began affiliating with one of several so-called Rosicrucian bodies. I want to delve into a detailed discussion about the Rosicrucians and their organizations. However, that fascinating topic, ripe for research and a delightful subject for disquisition on human foibles, will have to wait for another time. Not only did he join this organization and study with them, he also embarked on a strict spiritual and moral discipline. This included a regime of abstemious living, sexual continence, and a vegetarian diet. This regime was enough, surely, to break a stronger person than him. Once a robust fellow weighing 176 pounds, his weight swiftly dropped to about 135 pounds. Not only was his efficiency impaired, he also started experiencing fainting fits and endured long spells of weakness and languor. Coinciding with his dietary and lifestyle changes, and likely due to the neurological disturbances these changes caused, he had several psychic experiences that included involuntary astral projection and momentary clairvoyant glimpses. He had a successful theatrical career. I reiterate and emphasize this point. He featured in 6 Broadway plays and traveled all over the country from one theater to another. His income ran into several $1,000s per year. However, due to his mystical preferences and declining interest in theater, he eventually withdrew from the career he had strenuously strived to build. This became a closed chapter in his life. Nevertheless, his theater experience provided him with abilities that later facilitated success in his new line of work. His personality and teaching are both highly dramatic. We must not imagine that various events in a man's life lack a relationship with each other. A Barbados plantation, drama school, theater, professional dancing, and metaphysics teaching may seem disparate, but that appearance is due to our lack of insight. Our era is characterized by a search for superficial consistency, often overlooking deeper levels of reality. These hidden areas could reveal true continuity. A man's life is actually a continuum, despite any apparent divides. Growth and development in nature do not follow a straight line, rather they follow a spiral pattern. This includes seemingly backward trends, appearances and disappearances, surges and retreats, and recurrent endeavors. The Hegelian dialectical concept, a forward movement followed by its complete negation and then an emergence of an entirely new order, could be the real narrative behind all human effort. This cycle pervades all of nature, and man is no exception to it. Bearing such a concept in mind, we can more readily understand the intelligent direction of our lives, and specifically the work and life of Neville. Neville was a long-standing student and probationer in the Rosicrucian body. However, he was made of finer stuff and found the cult's narrow pseudo-occult religious dogmatism and lack of imagination unsatisfying. The order did not offer anything meaningful, and life revealed its mysteries to him more effectively. Eventually, he distanced himself from the order in search of something profound. Guided by an inner necessity, he entered the private sphere of an unusual Ethiopian rabbi, Abdullah. There, he studied the Qabalah, a form of Jewish mysticism, and acquired insightful interpretations of biblical books. In his book, Your Faith is Your Fortune, Neville asserted, the Bibles are psychological dramas symbolizing human consciousness. He also remarked, were people less tethered to orthodoxy and more intuitively aware, they couldn't ignore the frequent revelations of the awareness of being throughout this literature. Neville subsequently forged a novel method to comprehend the issue of man and his connection to the vibrant spiritual world. For the first time, he was entirely content and became a loyal disciple of the Ethiopian rabbi. His imagination also grew tremendously, envisaging life from an unprecedented perspective. No longer confined to the sterile, formalistic occult philosophy of this declining Rosicrucian body, he now envisioned God and man as one. This altered the entire course of his life. At the core of man's being was God, despite the human's blindness and ignorance. There was nothing outside of man that he had not himself created. The entire world was a world projected from within. The Ethiopian soon brought balance to his eager, groping mind. His fanatical vegetarianism, continence, and crankiness were discarded. He evolved into a unique specimen, a human being. This Neville is very human, incredibly so. With the evolution of his personality, he was able to develop independence from Abdullah. He emerged as a teacher in his own right. In February 1938, he began his successful career in New York City. Initially, he conducted meetings in a small room of a public building shared with other lecturers. Only a few people attended his lectures at first. However, as his skill and confidence in public speaking improved, his audience size increased. Now, as mentioned previously, one can visit the Old Actors Church 3 times a week to find a large, enthusiastic crowd. He has not yet gained nationwide recognition, but it is expected to come with time. In his discussions on metaphysics, he perceives the Bible as a psychological document rather than a historical one that dictates life's expression. His interpretation skills are impressive, and he applies an exegetical method that might astonish many psychoanalysts and professional dream interpreters. For instance, he approaches Dumas' novel, The Count of Monte Cristo, as a psychoanalyst would interpret a dream. His interpretation posits Edmond Dantes as an everyman, lost on life's tempestuous seas. Striving to find safety and refuge from the storm, Dantes is the personification of humanity's struggle. The wise old priest he encounters implies humanity's conscious awareness of existence. This timeless, unconditioned self has been trapped within humanity since the beginning of time. In the end, Dantes, having inherited the priest's wisdom and escaped in the sack meant for the priest, finds the hidden treasure. Once he is able to fully express himself and command his influence on the world, he becomes the Count of Monte Cristo. The sentence, Edmond Dantes becomes the Count of Monte Cristo, man becomes Christ, signifies his transformation. In another place, he analyzes the nature and character of the apostles. He concludes that they symbolize the 12 qualities of the mind, which are subject to human control and discipline. Regarding the story of Jesus washing the disciples' feet, he says that the foot symbolizes understanding, which must be cleansed of all personal beliefs or self-perceptions by the Lord. The story of Daniel is the story of every man. The lions Daniel encountered in the den represent the obstacles we all face in life, the issues of money, health, and interpersonal relationships. Most of us become so consumed by these problems, so oppressed by poverty, illness, or marital strife, that we can't find a solution. The problem becomes our obsession. It captivates us. Daniel chose to ignore the lions and turn to prayer. Essentially, he directed his attention inward to his I am consciousness, his true self, the only entity capable of resolving such problems. Therefore, Neville concludes his analysis by asserting that this method is also our way out. He insists that the solution that worked for Daniel will work for us too. I should mention at this point that Neville has written and published many pamphlets throughout his lecturing career. These focus on certain aspects of his system. Some discuss his views on particular themes and difficulties in the Bible. His theory's applications range across every biblical theme. They extend from the creation of the world to Christ's crucifixion, and from the meaning of circumcision to the significance of each of Jesus' 12 disciples. Recently, these essays have been collected and combined into a single volume entitled Your Faith is Your Fortune. I relied heavily on this volume to present my understanding of Neville's meaning. At times, one might feel as though psychoanalysts use more creativity than insight when interpreting intricate dreams. Similarly, we might sense Neville struggling to extract psychological significance from specific parts of the Bible. This challenge arises from using a book filled with diverse and non-psychological content as a primary source of psychological concepts. Yet, he effectively conveys the benefits of recognizing the alignment between one's consciousness and God. He explains, I am the eternal nothingness containing within my formless self the capacity to be all things. I am that in which all my conceptions of myself live and move and have their being, and apart from which they are not. The phrase, I am, is Neville's choice to denote the divine essence in man, and several reasons influence this decision. Most notably, this term is what God used as his name when speaking to Moses before the pivotal encounter with Pharaoh, "I am that I am." The same phrase is consistently iterated in Scripture, maintaining an abstract connotation. Apart from this, Neville employs the phrase "I am" as a necessary preface for self-definition. Before one can further qualify their identity, they must first assert "I am." To declare oneself as a man of particular age, race, location, profession, or status, the precursor "I am" is necessary. It's not about being this or that, but simply about being. We can shape this vast abstract concept with limitations such as sex, age, race, profession, yet it remains unformed, unconditioned, and unlimited. Similarly, the basic self of man, through a range of masks or adopting numerous roles, remains unconditionally and unformed. I am. Neville, in reality, is an atheist. Both he and his audiences would likely be surprised at this claim. However, he unambiguously states that there is no God outside of man. He believes that if man abandons the notion of God as an external entity and recognizes his own existence as God, he can transform his world from barren to bountiful. Here, he aligns himself philosophically with the old Buddhist reform. Gautama rebelled against orthodoxy, Brahmanism, and the Hindu Church. Interestingly, there are numerous parallels between Neville's conception of God and, say, Vedanta philosophy. I direct interested readers to Swami Vivekananda's book, Jnana Yoga. It offers a comprehensive presentation of Vedanta and compares well with thoughts expressed in Your Faith is Your Fortune. In my chapter on Christian Science, I provide a summary of Vedanta philosophy. The Buddha understood that as long as man relied on God, the church, and its priests for assistance, he was leaning on an already broken reed. In fact, he was leaning on a reed that didn't exist tangibly. It was an obvious falsehood. To find solutions for the pressing problems of everyday life, only one thing can be trusted: man and his inner consciousness. That is the ultimate reality. Anything else can be explained away, challenged, or denied, but this alone remains. Upon realizing this fact, one can draw upon secret reserves of strength and inspiration. It allows the discovery of a hidden source of salvation that can be applied to every experience in the harsh, cold world of reality. Fundamentally, this is Buddhism and the creed of Buddha. God, or the wisdom of enlightenment, is inherent in each of our minds. It is the essence of the mind which is intrinsically pure. Sadly, it has become obscured. The issue at hand is to eliminate this obscurity, this delusion under which the mind operates, and unveil the light of true consciousness that dwells beneath. Just like Neville, who, although an atheist like Buddha, denies the validity of a distant, capricious personal God, he categorically states that within man exists an unconditioned, uncreated, unmade, unformed, and unbound consciousness, God. By achieving an ecstasy of feeling in one's prayer and meditation, one can discover this divine freedom within. Poverty, sickness, and need only stem from the products of conscious thought, the results of the mind separating from its divine roots. These hardships are born from denial, from the refusal to accept that man's consciousness at its deepest level, known as the subconscious, is God and holds the ability to both create and annihilate his world. This power can destroy the current world of sickness, sorrow, and various kinds of need in which we all live. Likewise, it can create a world of happiness, health, abundance of every conceivable kind on each plane of existence. Many people have experienced what they initially thought were miracles by accepting and applying the principles he disclosed. While the doctrine and its implications are not new, having been known and taught since time began, they are new to some individuals. They're hearing it for the first time. Notably, Neville delivers his teachings with simplicity and force, a skill warranting recognition. However, there are others who, despite agreeing intellectually with his teachings, cannot make them work. Despite their intense efforts, they fail to see the desired results. These individuals eventually abandon his system and become increasingly critical, even vindictive. They insinuate that those achieving satisfactory results through Neville's guidance are merely victims of his hypnotism. The type of person who makes such statements does not understand the fundamental psychological aspect of Neville's teachings or the basic fact about Neville himself. It is a straightforward fact that Neville is a dancer. I have observed Neville dancing, and he is indeed superb. His body is magnificent, and he emits an undeniable charm, not to mention his noteworthy good looks. When Neville dances, his muscles exude a lithe suppleness, akin to that observed in a trained athlete. Each of his movements suggests immense power held in a state of repose. His actions echo the effortless grace of a feline, marked by sensual and forceful gestures. Neville, being an artist, understands the import of fluctuating between relaxation and tension. Above all, he is well versed in the art of dancing. Neville's metaphysics and system reflect a dance, encapsulating words, mind, and feelings. Unless one can dance alongside him, his system might prove futile. This system is in fact a personal one, extending from his unique personality. To make it efficacious as he does, one must strive to emulate his traits. An artist to the core, he immerses himself deeply and imaginatively in every task. He's passionate, always fueled by a fiery zeal. His artistry is more genuine than his desire to publicly expound the system he propagates. He is capable of spontaneously applying his own teachings. However, the challenge arises when conveying the practical aspects of his system to non-artists. Those who lack his creative or emotional depth may struggle to participate in this intellectual dance, which evidently means so much to him. Perhaps among his audience, there are individuals with the necessary artistic and mystical temperament, identical, really, who can not only absorb the truth as Neville presents it, but also immediately apply it. They can demonstrate successfully, to borrow a cliché. The average person, with their commercially minded, unimaginative view on life and uninspiring work and home, struggles to recognize the inner spiritual being that Neville refers to as I am. Such a person cannot generate the intense emotion, that fleeting madness, which Neville expects of those wishing to apply his teachings successfully. A burning white-hot passion is merely a phrase to them. As a result, unable to propel themselves into such an emotional fervor, which can be directed in certain predefined ways, Neville's words fall on barren ground. In a sense, it's not their fault. Life has dealt harshly with them, and I don't blame them in any way. I sympathize deeply with their predicament. Among all the metaphysical systems I know, Neville's is the most notably magical. Due to its magical nature, it necessitates structured training from those wishing to explore its depths. It demands more than a change of perspective. It calls for a mental revolution. A brand new and profound approach to life and living must be established, not just intellectually, but emotionally too. In particular, the student must master the subtle skill of relaxation. This shouldn't be achieved by neglecting the body's needs, but rather by learning the simplicity of the approach. Neville has an innate grasp on relaxation as a dancer who must, by obligation, relax. However, I don't think he fully grasps that an average individual attending his talk may not know how to relax or understand the concept of letting go. He does mention relaxation. He advises, close your eyes and feel yourself as faceless, formless, and figureless. Approach this stillness as if it were the simplest task to accomplish. This attitude will ensure your success. Yet for the average person, this advice is insufficient. A more detailed and scientific instruction is essential. The average individual often struggles to evoke their feelings and emotions powerfully. They may not understand how to arouse the passionate intensity necessary for complete identification with or recognition of the unconditioned, the faceless, formless consciousness that Neville discusses. To some extent, it may be easier to succeed with women than men. Women are generally more emotional. The average male, conversely, is often emotionally repressed. From early boyhood, he is taught either directly or indirectly to conceal his feelings, viewed as sissy-ish. By early adolescence, his emotions are well hidden. As a result, when he reaches adulthood, he often appears devoid of feelings. His emotions are repressed into the hidden depths of his unconscious life, leading to total inhibition. This can even impact his mental well-being. The emotional life is the underpinning of every other aspect of our lives. It's hardly surprising, then, that emotional repression can lead to physical and mental illness. It may even lead to a sense of impotency and neediness. This problem is common among average adults approaching any form of metaphysics, primarily males, but to a certain extent, females as well. It surfaces when emotions have been violently oppressed and all feelings inhibited. Accordingly, a serious question emerges. What practice can be undertaken to summon the emotions from their depths, which are crucial for cultivating the passionate intensity that leads to spiritual experiences and the ability to demonstrate? Neville, while possibly not entirely suited to his predicament, at least exhibits wisdom. It's hard to establish whether his steps were deliberate or intuitive, yet they undoubtedly serve a useful purpose. He understands that the average individual attending his lectures likely has some form of religious education, even if it has been forgotten or abandoned. In one way or another, this training usually lingers in the person's unconscious. Emotions associated with early religious lessons usually remain high. These include the first prayers taught by our mothers and our initial awe-struck experiences at Sunday school. Such memories remain stored within us, and their resilience is confirmed under hypnotic examination. Hence, Neville cloaks his system in a magic veil of religion, advocating Bible study to comprehend the psychological drama he discusses. In using the Bible, he reaches the deepest realms of consciousness, taking us back to our emotional infancy. In doing so, he marshals the power and energy tied to that part of our minds, stimulating it into dynamic action to achieve his system's purpose. Whether this technique is wholly successful or even desirable is another tale. It works sometimes, but very often it does not. The listener, at times, is so inhibited and repressed that even the stimulus of the Bible can't awaken the unconditioned consciousness's magical power to accomplish his will and actualize his vision. Among all the popular metaphysics teachers, Neville may be the most open-minded. Several months ago, I invited him to observe some practical experimental work with hypnosis and suggestion. Following the experiment, I suggested to Neville that autosuggestion is the pivotal element in all metaphysics and New Thought. We had just witnessed a hypnotic demonstration where an individual performed physical and intellectual feats that would be impossible in a waking state. Through meditation and prayer, a metaphysics devotee can also perform tasks which he couldn't have done otherwise. I speculated that there must be some correlation. In hypnosis, heterosuggestion plays a role. In metaphysics, self or autosuggestion could be the fundamental factor. Neville did not find it against his principles of truth. In fact, he willingly accepted my idea, noting that defective early training had hypnotized man out of recognizing his godlike nature. Therefore, it appeared reasonable to him to use suggestion, not to add more ideas to an already burdened psychological apparatus, but to evoke what already exists within, dormant, latent, and unseen. His system essentially amounts to this: when all the superfluous details are removed and the veneer of the Bible and its terminology are discarded. He requires complete relaxation to access the deeper levels of the mind, the unconscious. In the ecstatic state induced by contemplating phrases and verses from the Bible, you must impart the desires you wish to fulfill into the unconscious. He believes such straightforward acceptance of your desires is like sowing fertile seeds into ever-ready soil. Once you release your desire into your consciousness like a seed, confident it will bloom into its full potential, you have fulfilled your part. In essence, this is a perfect depiction of the principle of autosuggestion. In another place, he emphasizes the effectiveness of faith as a crucial component to successful demonstration. For instance, he says, "The belief in the power of drugs to heal, diets to strengthen, or money to provide security are metaphorical money changers that must be expelled from the temple. The thieves who rob you are your own false beliefs. It's your belief in a thing, not the thing itself, that assists you." There's a broad consensus here with contemporary psychological knowledge. Every doctor knows that half of his patients would respond just as well to a regime of sugar-coated pills as to specific medical therapy. Even surgical operations serve only to provide the patient with what they desire subconsciously, thereby aiding their recovery. The effectiveness lies in the suggestive value of such factors. Psychoanalysis offers insightful lessons about the hypnotic or suggestive value of any therapeutic agent. It's effective if the patient's emotions can be rerouted or moved away from symptom formation. The phenomenon of transference is just as prevalent in the lecture hall as it is in a consultation room or clinic. Hourly and daily, we give ourselves countless suggestions and allow others to do the same. For many, life consists of suggestion and countersuggestion. Over the radio, on the streets, in newspaper and magazines, we are constantly bombarded with suggestions until we succumb to their appealing influence. It seems that modern selling and advertising rely primarily on how creatively one can suggest to the public that they must buy things they don't necessarily need. It's not faith that makes the drugs and medicines advertised effective. Advertisements tell us these products work, and due to their consistent emphasis, we come to accept these claims. When we're in trouble and use these advertised items, they don't succeed because they're inherently effective or due to faith. Instead, they work only because the ads have convinced us they will be successful. Neville's emphasis on faith and belief may be perceived more as a facade due to our lack of understanding regarding why suggestion sometimes works and why it sometimes doesn't. Effectiveness does not lie in the old religious sense of faith, but rather in the necessity and feeling of being desperate. When one strictly adheres to the protocols of autosuggestion, success inevitably follows. This is why such a person is deemed to have faith. We also need to acknowledge that faith is an emotional attribute. It triggers an intensity of feeling, which is a crucial factor for the successful unconscious reception of suggestion, desire, or mental image. Faith, in itself, doesn't hold any scientific validity. It is merely convenient as an emotional stimulant. When everything else fails and despair sets in, faith stimulates an individual's nature to respond to the subsequent healing or corrective situation. In terms of Neville's teachings, theory and practice are inextricably linked. Philosophy becomes the means for demonstration. God is the alpha, omega, and intermediary of theory and practice. Given this perspective, further contemplation on Neville's interpretation of God becomes essential. The book is titled Your Faith is Your Fortune. The text attempts, right from the outset, to present the significant problem confronted by all philosophies, religious or otherwise. How does an infinite, omnipresent, eternal, and omnipotent God bring the world into being? Moreover, what role does the world play concerning him? Christian theology, based upon the Bible, solves this problem by proposing a miraculous creation from nothing. The concept is simple. God created the world and everything in it. Neville, influenced by the Bible and Christian teaching, more or less follows this miraculous theme. However, he adapts it to his particular conception of God. The world is your consciousness, objectified, he suggests, is applicable to the original creation of the world as much as it is to the continuous creation and renewal of our individual worlds. The conceiver and the conception are one, but the conceiver is greater than his conception, he adds, with the conceiver being God and the whole of creation being his conception. Naturally, God is greater than his conception, which, though part of him and his own substance, is not entirely identical to him. In the beginning was the unconditioned awareness of being, and the unconditioned awareness of being became conditioned by imagining itself to be something, and the unconditioned awareness of being became that which it had imagined itself to be. Thus, creation began. This quote from one of his pamphlets, Before Abraham, I Was, succinctly captures the essence of Neville's teachings. It encompasses his entire belief system. In both verbal discussions and written works, he elaborates, restates, and emphasizes this principle in countless ways, using the full range of his eloquence and passion. However, his teachings are not mere metaphysical explorations. We shouldn't assume that he is expounding an intricate cosmological theory or offering new insights into dialectics or ontology. Neville is not an abstract thinker or a philosopher. He is uninterested in metaphysical intricacies. Emphasize this. He is an artist, and an artist's imagination ceaselessly pours into creation and action. Neville identifies as a practical person above all. His central belief is that our primal consciousness, our unconditioned awareness of existence that is limitless, formless, and free, often misconstrues itself. This consciousness reflects itself in our actions and thoughts, every minute, of every hour, of every day. Before conceiving of something outside of himself, God had to be moved by desire. This is why Neville places such emphasis on desire. For him, desire is both a savior and redeemer. He views it as holy and creative, providing the necessary dynamic for life. According to him, it is part of the divine nature, which can free us from our limitations, open our prison doors, and make us whole once more. He advises, see your desires as the spoken words of God, and each word as a prophecy of what you can become. Don't question whether you're worthy or unworthy of realizing these desires. He encourages, accept them as they arrive and express gratitude for them as if they were gifts. Importantly, he asserts, every problem automatically produces its solution in the form of a desire to be free from the problem. Thus, the essential role that desire holds in his theology becomes apparent. If a desire is intensely felt and can be reinforced with enough emotion to reach a significant degree, it will become an objective reality. If God can be moved by desire to evolve conceptions that can assume form, so can man. For God is only man's consciousness, his self-awareness. Man is that primal consciousness. Man is God, not as he consciously sees himself, but deep down in his heart, unconsciously. As man understands himself, he is clearly limited in numerous ways. His desires rarely fulfill themselves, as he is essentially impotent. However, in his unconscious self, in the secret place of the Most High, he is unconditioned, formless, faceless, and uncreated. His desires materialize, whether he is aware of it or not, always mirroring outwards and projecting themselves objectively. It's vital to emphasize this distinction, which I believe Neville hasn't sufficiently done. Man is not God, except at the deepest levels of his soul. Man can reach this realization when he is exceptionally peaceful and quiet. Only when the activity of the thinking mind, the superficial self, has completely stopped, can man know in that silence that I am is God. He will then understand that his consciousness is God, while what he is conscious of being is the Son bearing witness of God, the Father. When Neville speaks of consciousness, it would have been more accurate to use a more specific term. Using phrases such as unconscious or subconscious mind, while reserving consciousness for what he refers to as the Son, could have improved clarity. This is namely what man is conscious of being or manifesting. Without such distinction, we reach an unsettling conclusion that suggests we are insane. In mental asylums, there are vast numbers of patients who assert, quite consciously and deliberately, that they are God. Observing and hearing these assertions is a poignant experience. We should not dismiss their state of mind as inherently different from ours due to mental imbalance or insanity. To avoid such assumptions, we need to think more rationally. We need to define our terms more precisely. Though not explicitly, Neville's system does offer such clarification implicitly, and it just needs to be made more explicit. We are not God in our conscious state upon waking. However, there is part of our psyche that we normally aren't aware of, which can be referred to as God or I am. This distinction aids in sparing us from the chilling inference that we are also insane, thus allowing us to maintain a degree of sanity and balance. Our life is rooted entirely in the unconscious I am. Like the Bible says, in him we live and move and have our being. Without God, or its psychological equivalent, the deep consciousness of man, the unconscious, we have no life. We tend to believe we are masters of our own houses, independent and not in need of God. This belief arises because of our vanity and egoism. Truthfully, we are significantly reliant on the effective functioning of the unconscious psyche. Hence, ensuring our roots lie in the right place is crucial. The diverse events and experiences in our daily lives result from its manifestation and the projections of this unconscious psyche within us. The contents of our conscious thinking and imagination wholly depend on and stems from the activity of the unconscious. All the devised thoughts and predispositions to particular types of experiences are constantly evolving within us, unknowingly. Both God and the unconscious convey an equivalent meaning. Irrespective of its true essence, one thing is certain: we are unable to exist without it in any manner. We know very little about the unconscious, and only slightly more about its workings. We believe the conscious thinking self evolves from it, yet retains its roots in its unformed darkness. In a child, we can observe the growth of the ego from an early age, witnessing the development of speech and understanding. We can see a mind form where once only irrational irresponsibility existed. Life and the unconscious existed long before the child could say I. Despite the absence of this I, as seen during sleep or coma, life and spirit or God still continue. This is evident from our observation of others, as well as our dreams. We presume the process occurring in the individual is a rapid recapitulation of a psychic process that took place thousands or possibly millions of years ago. This process occurred during the development of humanity when mind emerged gradually onto the evolutionary scene. Mind evolved from the unconscious and remains dependent on it to this day. Man's current understanding of himself has evolved from his primal awareness of being. This understanding, when required, can alter his perception in profound and wonderful ways, God and the unconscious are synonymous, implying the same reality. Just as all things flow from God as his conceptions, our environment takes shape in the same way from the unconscious. God created the world through his imaginative concepts, and the unconscious similarly forms its own world. The concept is encapsulated as, your world is your consciousness objectified. Unfortunately, the tragedy of the present is our ignorance of this fact. We have lost contact with the infinite, erroneously severing our ties with the unconscious world of inner reality, the true source of life. Consequently, we are a society tragically dispossessed of our roots, both creative and spiritual. The outcome of this detachment is that we find ourselves impotent, insignificant, and unhealthy. The law of creation states, first conceive, then become that conceived. All things evolve out of nothing. Without this sequence, nothing that is made would exist. If our environmental world, unique to each of us, is distasteful and hateful, we must remember it is a reflection of ourselves. The concept is, the world is your consciousness objectified. Understanding how to change it logically follows the thesis of creation. Neville emphasized, waste no time trying to change the outside. Change the within, or the impression, and the outer expression will take care of itself. If our environment is unfavorable, it implies that we must have conceived it at a previous time. Whether knowingly or unknowingly, we must have first evolved it as a possibility within ourselves. We must have mirrored it into being, identifying ourselves with it. To create a new world, it is futile to alter the pieces of the puzzle from the outside. New conceptions must be formulated within, conceptions that the conceiver can manipulate to form new objective realities. But how does one create these new conceptions? How does one use this faculty that serves as the conceiving function of all things? Consciousness or God is a magical faculty possessing all power. It can miraculously alter, change, create, and destroy forms, ideas, and beings. There is only one power, and this power is God, consciousness. This power can both create and destroy, heal and wound, and undertake operations, good, bad, or indifferent. Consciousness resides within what it is aware of being. For example, I Am Man is the Lord in his temple. Therefore, it is crucial to call on the deep self, upon God. He can magically rearrange all parts of the body, environment, and the surrounding world, which is his temple. The desired goal is to better align with the heart's desires. Only God has the foresight and power to predict and arrange how events might develop. We can only provide the goal by formulating the wish. However, the means and manner in which it will occur are entirely beyond us. This is entirely in the jurisdiction of the unconscious, whose wisdom will dictate the course of future events. Jung indicates how this could possibly be in one of the psychological essays in his book, Modern Man in Search of a Soul. Discussing the nature of the unconscious, he suggests that it contains certain primordial instinctual patterns inherited from the past. These patterns represent definitive processes of development and evolution. Moreover, were it permissible to personify the unconscious, he proposes it could be described as a collective human entity. This entity would combine the traits of both sexes, transcend youth and age, birth and death, and command human experience spanning 1 or 2 million years, thus appearing nearly immortal. If such a being existed, it would stand above all temporal changes. The present would hold no more or less significance for it than any year in the 100th century before Christ. It would be a dreamer of age-old dreams and, due to its vast experience, an unparalleled prognosticator. Having lived countless times over the life of the individual, family, tribe, and people, this being would possess a living sense of growth, flowering, and decay's rhythm. It is no exaggeration or a misguided conviction to assume that the details of fulfilling wishes can be left to our inner wisdom and experience. The real problem is not the incapacity of the unconscious to fulfill the wish, but how to harness its power for our benefit. You cannot serve two masters or opposing states of consciousness simultaneously, Neville asserts. By shifting your attention from one state to another, you withdraw from the former and express the latter. According to Neville, we must emulate Daniel by turning away from confronting adversities and forgetting them to pray effectively. The first step, then, is to disregard the empirical evidence. It requires ignoring the world that one's mind and all one's faculties perceive. We've already established that he views the world as simply an outward representation of an internal spiritual state. Therefore, it follows that we should disregard the immediate issues we encounter, be they financial, health-related, or concerning love and status. Neville advises his followers to divert their focus away from these issues. This neglect inevitably leads to their deterioration, while the redirected attention becomes engrossed in forming new ideologies that will reflect themselves in altered worldly circumstances. Forget about the past, he suggests. A complete overhaul of one's existence based on divine principles, asserting oneself to indeed be godlike, will provoke desired environmental changes. Once this expansion of consciousness is achieved, you can shape the new idea within this amorphous depth of your being. Simply claim and feel yourself to be what you yearn to be before reaching this state. Inside this formless depth, all things seem divinely possible. With time, whatever you sincerely believe you are in this expanded state will become your natural expression. As I've described, we need to divert our minds from immediate problems. Neville suggests that instead of out of sight, out of mind, we should phrase it as out of mind, out of sight. This notion isn't unique to Neville. As far as I know, modern religious and metaphysical movements commonly share it. However, by logical or scientific standards, the concept isn't valid. Despite its contradictions and illogicality, metaphysicians find it commendable. Citing St. Paul, they maintain that the world's wisdom is seen as foolishness by God. However, it doesn't imply that this world's folly equates to God's wisdom. Disregarding the contemporary approach of facing a problem head-on to uncover its hidden psychological meaning is a common practice. The assumption being that once the attention is removed, the problem will cease to exist. It is believed that a problem will only remain in sight until the initial force given by the conceiver, I am, exhausts itself. Before suggesting that I find this procedure highly illogical and baseless, I want to clarify that I sympathize with much of the content of mysticism. I am also well aware of the limitations and inadequacies of the thinking principle. Furthermore, I acknowledge that the services of a superior or different faculty are needed to lead us out of the confusion that solely using our minds would lead to. Nonetheless, the conscious thinking self has an important role to play. Our task is to expand the reach of its operations so that it eventually encompasses most of what was previously termed unconscious. The concept of out of sight, out of mind is a metaphysical fallacy. It appears to make sense on the surface. If you remove something from your mind, it seems removed from sight. However, this does not confirm that the mental content is permanently erased. It might simply no longer be consciously recognized. Similar to an ostrich with its head in the sand, we might be unaware of its existence in our mind. Such a reasoning was valid before depth psychology. Back then, it was believed that diverting one's mind from certain thoughts and feelings would annihilate them. Today, however, we understand that people can manage their emotions and thoughts to the point where they become unconscious. Consequently, we may deny that we ever had such thoughts or feelings. Our denials correlate with severe repression or forced forgetting. This repression is so intense that we genuinely believe we never had these thoughts or feelings. Despite this, these thoughts and memories remain real, even if they are now unconscious. They may even be more potent, and often unpleasantly so. Repressed thoughts and feelings reside in the unconscious levels of our psyche, the real power behind the throne. This is the engine room of our body and mind. These repressed elements, often more significant than conscious states, mirror themselves in the creation of our social, economic, and familial conditions. These are the dynamic ideas we unknowingly feed to our deeper selves, transforming these ideas into our reality. Neville said, "God, your awareness, is no respecter of persons. This awareness, purely impersonal, receives impressions, qualities, and attributes defining your consciousness." To expand on this notion, the unconscious does not respect or favor any one idea. It is impartial and brings to fruition whatever ideas are presented to it, whether good, bad, or indifferent. Turning our backs on problems can be dangerous, no matter how appealing it seems. There is a vast amount of clinical evidence that proves repressed ideas and experiences manifest into our reality, often contributing to our illnesses and social issues, amongst other things. The problem we face is often a reflection of ourselves. By studying these unsolved problems, we learn about our true selves. Much thought and meditation should be focused on these problems, prompting us to question why before making use of metaphysical methods to eliminate them. Sometimes we might be better off accepting these bitter pills, as they often benefit us more than outright rejection. Assuming that what we see in our external world is merely a projection of the mind, and then completely disregarding this visible projection from within, is an affront to our integrity and intellectual honesty. Before embarking on creating new spiritual images within ourselves, it seems more reasonable to question why previous pictures were created that led to such undesirable effects. What significance do these images hold? What does this problem, environment, or situation signify? There must be a meaning. Otherwise, our existence would crumble around us like a poorly built house of cards. Thereby, our spiritual work should aim to expand our understanding of life and ourselves. This enables us to unearth the meaning in every single phenomenon. As Charles Fillmore, the Unity leader, explains in his book Christian Healing, the material forms we see around us represent a complex problem being solved by one mind. To understand that problem and to glimpse its meaning, we must understand the ideas behind these material forms. This is what we call studying the mind behind nature. Humans are intellectual beings who can understand the plan and intricate ideas of the supreme mind. Concerning the technical aspect of ignoring or denying facts, since they are merely reflections of internal concepts projected by the visionary into the real world, Neville provides commentary on a story from the Bible. He directs our attention to the book of Numbers, which states, "There were giants in the land, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and we were in their sight as grasshoppers." Interpreting this within the context of his specific framework, Neville says, "Today, in this eternal present, conditions in the world appear gigantic. The unemployed, enemy armies, business competition, and other challenges make you feel like a helpless grasshopper. It is noted that we first perceive ourselves as being powerless grasshoppers, and due to this self-perception, we also appear as such to our adversaries." He continues, "We can only be to others what we are to ourselves. Hence, as we reassess our worth and start feeling powerful, like giants, we automatically alter our relationship with these giants. This diminishes these former threats to their true status, rendering them as seemingly helpless grasshoppers. Though persuasive on initial inspection, it's not completely true. I am aware of men who are perceived as exceptional by the world. They have accomplished much, possessing prestigious positions, power, and wealth. However, they privately battle with a persistent feeling of inferiority, seeing themselves as the helpless grasshoppers mentioned in Numbers. Yet, this remains unknown to the world. No one is aware or even suspects their inner turmoil, forever doubting and tormenting themselves. Only they are privy to it. This internal conflict persists throughout the day and continues in their dreams. Still, even their closest friends and colleagues do not suspect this for a moment. This is a secret they must never divulge. The world will never know because they will never reveal it. Like many public speakers and successful actors, I am sure Neville often felt nervous and frightened, especially at the start of his public career, just prior to delivering a lecture. However, as far as the audience was concerned, he always appeared calm, collected, and poised. I've experienced similar emotions so many times, it no longer surprises me. A friend of mine, who has delivered thousands of lectures, including radio addresses, always becomes nervous to the point that his physiological functions are momentarily affected. Despite this, he is widely successful and recognized, despite his occasional self-doubts. To some, he is even considered a giant in his field. Things are not always as they appear. The way we see ourselves is not always how others perceive us. I may feel worthless and valueless, yet to hundreds, maybe thousands of people, I could hold invaluable worth. Life cannot be simplified into a few formulas that can be universally applied. It's not entirely true that as we reassess ourselves and perceive ourselves as giants, we actually become giants. We often encounter egotistical braggarts, even within our own familiar circles, who boast about their purported importance. Despite their insistence on being giants, our reaction to their self-evaluation is often one of pity and sympathy for such misguided individuals. Neville's underlying idea is essentially correct. However, there is a misunderstanding about the levels at which we must apply his principle. His system requires a better definition of terms and a more precise usage of words. The significant aspect isn't our conscious evaluation of ourselves, it's what we feel about ourselves at our core, which unfortunately remains unknown to most of us. The feelings on the unconscious side of the psyche, what Neville refers to as our awareness of being, shape people's perception of us. For instance, I may unconsciously feel like a worm, but no matter how much I consciously compensate for this deep-seated inferiority and claim to be a giant, the world will perceive me as a worm. On the contrary, while my conscious assessment of myself may be quite low, my real and unconscious self-appreciation, revealed for instance in dreams, might be significant. In this case, the unconscious view will ultimately prevail, and I will indeed appear as one of the giants, both to myself and to the world. Those in my environment may then perceive me as having greater potential than I show, asserting that he is a gigantic personality if he could express himself, as one day he will. Apart from these theoretical considerations, Neville's technique is both fascinating and psychodynamically instructive. To be more graphic, consider it in relation to a particular problem. While we will focus on a specific type of problem, understand that Neville himself perceives it as applicable to any eventuality that could come up. Moreover, he asserts its limitations are essentially unknown. For instance, imagine having attended his lectures and learned some of his principles, and then finding yourself facing a problem. You have just received a $500 bill for your house. Without any remaining funds and no loans available from the bank or friends, you are unsure of where to turn. Overwhelmed with worry and anxiety, you're ready to take drastic measures, even contemplating pulling out your own hair. This is a difficult situation to be in, especially if you're experiencing baldness, like the author. So, what should be your next move? Neville almost suggests that you should sit or lie in a comfortable position on your couch and close your eyes. Begin to repeatedly murmur the phrase, I am, I am. It's not about saying, I am this or I am that. Simply affirm your own awareness of being, which is the fundamental aspect of your consciousness. As both mind and body relax, you may experience a sensation of floating in space. Through the continual recitation of this divine phrase, try to understand yourself as unconditioned, faceless, and formless. View yourself as the primal consciousness that underlies the regular activities of mind and body. Develop this level of consciousness until you feel identified with it. Upon reaching this state of awareness, picture the $500, which you absolutely need, as already being in your possession. To remain conscious of being poor while praying for wealth results in being rewarded with exactly what you're conscious of, that being poverty. For prayers to be successful, they must be asserted and appropriated. You should assume the positive consciousness of the thing you desire. With your desire clearly defined, quietly withdraw inwardly and close the door behind you. Immerse yourself in your desire. Perceive yourself as one with it. Maintain this fixation until you've assimilated its essence and identity by asserting and feeling that you are and possess what you have desired. In this relaxed and elevated mood, shift your focus to the nature of your desire. Affirming, I want $500 when you're emotionally heightened isn't advisable. It merely emphasizes your need for money. This emphasis indirectly suggests and inevitably results in the continuation of your materialistic condition, which needs to be addressed and overcome. Remember, Neville defines God as your unconditioned awareness of yourself. To define yourself, you must first state, I am, followed by your name, sex, color, age, nationality, and so on. In this highly relaxed state, where you have affirmed yourself to be God, the unconditioned I am consciousness, the next stage must be to condition this unlimited abstract awareness in a predetermined way. Simply stating a need for a certain sum of money is not practical. However, affirming emphatically that I am abundance or I am substance, the infinite supply from which all demands shall be met, is a good technique. Complete identification with the desire is imperative. This specifically conditions the initial formless consciousness, modifying it according to the terms of the suggestion or affirmation. According to Neville's formulations, this suggestion is a seed that will be vitalized by God, growing into a visible actuality for everyone to see. How would you feel if you had this money right now? How would you feel if the problem were resolved now, depressed or elated? Then aim to invoke this sense of ecstasy, the joy of having this money. Fervently imagine that a check for $500 has been swiftly written, freeing your mind from this haunting specter that had assumed such terrifying proportions. Envision yourself in the presence of your closest friend, asserting that your problem has been resolved and that you have the money to settle this bill. Picture and truly believe that he too shares in your joy. He shakes your hand energetically and embraces you, overjoyed to see that worry and anxiety have been lifted from your shoulders. All things gravitate to the consciousness with which they resonate. All things disentangle themselves from the consciousness with which they are discordant. Consciously define yourself as that which you desire. Assert yourself as that which you want to be fulfilled. Neville asserts that encouraging positive states of consciousness, such as joy and happiness, can alter external conditions. He believes that your consciousness is the master of your reality. Thus, if you are conscious of having the money to solve your problem, an event will occur to manifest this inner vision externally. The mechanics of this occurrence remain a mystery. However, it doesn't involve supernatural events like miraculous gifts from heaven. Instead, it's likely that the needed funds could come from someone already known to us or a readily available means. In fact, many people claim to have successfully applied this principle. His approach to the problem of time is captivating. Suppose, as an example, you need to produce $500 within a few days. It's currently Wednesday, and you need the money by Sunday. How do we handle this situation? What steps should be taken? The initial procedure would mirror what has been previously described. The money we mentioned has not only been promised, but it is also already present. Imagine this money arriving unexpectedly on a Sunday. Picture your feelings on that day. Currently, you are stressed, apprehensive, and filled with worry. Your mind has incessantly been preoccupied with imagining the grim potential outcomes and complexities of facing sheriffs and eviction notices. Eventually, Sunday comes around and you are handed $500. Can you imagine the state of your mind? Utilize all your imagination and emotions. Delight in the fantasy of the pleasure and relief from holding that $500 in your hand. Picture yourself waving that check triumphantly in front of Neville. You now have $500 in your possession. All your problems can effectively disappear. You have been saved. We have often remarked, this day feels just like Sunday, or Monday, or even Saturday. In the middle of summer, we may have said, this feels and looks like autumn. This is a clear indication that we associate certain feelings with different days, months, and seasons of the year. Due to this association, we can consciously immerse ourselves in any selected day or season at any time. In other words, we associate specific emotional tones with certain days or seasons, enabling us to easily visualize those times in our minds. For most of us, Sunday carries a well-defined set of images and feelings that can be effortlessly evoked for our exercise's purpose. Suppose today is Wednesday, and you decide that it's entirely possible to embody a new realization of yourself by Sunday. In that case, Sunday becomes the time point you would visit. To do so, you close out Wednesday and welcome Sunday. You accomplish this by simply feeling that it is Sunday. Start hearing the church bells. Begin to sense the tranquility of the day and everything else Sunday symbolizes for you. Truly feel that it is Sunday. Once this is achieved, experience the joy of receiving that which was only a desire on Wednesday. Revel in the thrill of having received it, then return to Wednesday, the time point you left behind. In doing this, you form a vacuum in consciousness by transitioning from Wednesday to Sunday. Nature, detesting a vacuum, swiftly rushes in to fill it, thereby shaping a mold reflecting what you potentially create, the joy of realizing your desired goal. By contemplating now, on Wednesday, the feelings of ecstasy and freedom you would experience on Sunday when the savings arrive, you project yourself forward in time. As most metaphysical teachings suggest, time is merely a creation of man's consciousness, a form of his thinking and feeling, and thus it may be transcended, and future events can be anticipated. As the Bible states, now is the appointed time. Not tomorrow, not Sunday, and not even next year. Right now, at this very moment, one can save oneself. These states of consciousness require not just mental focus and resolute purpose, indomitable will and courage, but also a keen ability to feel. They demand the potential for enormous emotion at a moment's notice. Whether the average person can achieve this is debatable, though some individuals certainly can. Neville, I believe, is one of those individuals. But he is an artist, a dancer. His training and life's discipline have equipped him to play a specific role. He can take on a certain persona, acting it out convincingly. His talent lies in identifying with mental images and adopting personalities other than his own. This is an intrinsic part of his emotional constitution. That's why such states of consciousness are accessible to him. Naturally, they are also available to others who have similar training and makeup. John Doe, unfortunately, is incapable of such unrestrained flights of feeling and imagination. His mind is entirely too prosaic, his feelings excessively inhibited, and his imagination too confined for such excursions. I do not suggest that such feats are impossible for the average person. However, I do argue that necessary training is required in the art of letting go, emotional discipline, and psychological state analysis. This requires significant time and effort, deterring many from embracing such a demanding lifestyle. If they do not wish to make this effort, then such states of consciousness and spiritual accomplishments will remain but dreams, fantasies, and visions of a world beyond their grasp. While my sympathies largely align with Neville's conceptions and techniques, I feel that several elements are missing from his method. He is unquestionably correct to emphasize feeling. Through an intense feeling, anything becomes possible. However, the challenge lies in provoking such intensity, a frenzied storm of emotion through which one might establish communication with the unconscious self. This aspect has not been sufficiently addressed. Moreover, Neville recommends relaxation. He suggests that one should relax to the point of floating, losing awareness of one's body. But how can we achieve such in-depth relaxation? This task isn't easy for most of us. What guidance does Neville provide? Divert your attention from your problem and focus it on your being, Neville advises. Silently but profoundly say, I am. Just feel that you are faceless and formless, and persist in this feeling until you experience a sense of floating. Floating is a psychological state that entirely negates the physical realm. It's found that a state of pure receptivity is developed through practicing relaxation and consciously refraining from reacting to sensory stimuli. I'm willing to bet that most people who listen to him or any other metaphysical teacher have little idea of how to relax. Relaxation, in truth, has nothing metaphysical about it. A deep state of respite from neuromuscular tension can be achieved by adhering to a few straightforward rules that are compatible with recognized physiological and psychological laws. I intend to discuss this topic later and suggest a comprehensive technique for effective relaxation. Moreover, and more importantly, how should we develop this intense feeling? Simply relaxing won't suffice. Indeed, it is possible to relax, lose complete bodily consciousness, and blissfully drift away from sensory and mental awareness, yet remain as impassive as a fish. Neville's method is undeniably effective, but the challenge lies in the limited number of people who can muster up such emotional exaltation or intellectual concentration. These elements are crucial for traversing the path to our subconscious mind. As a result of inadequate training or technique, the mind tends to wander, and a myriad of things unrelated to the concept of I am often distract us. In my opinion, the ancients possessed superior techniques. Faced with similar problems and training gaps, they created methods that have withstood the test of time. For some individuals, they proposed a lengthy course in psychological training aimed at developing an immense power of mental concentration. This training is now known as yoga. For others, who were either not inclined or reluctant to undertake such an extremely strenuous discipline, they developed alternate methods, Anything that tends to exalt the mind and feelings is useful. Music, color, poetry, perfumes, anything that can intoxicate the mind and senses within certain limits is utilizable. It is more complex to describe invocation, another method they employed. It would be simpler to explain it by quoting several examples from these pages, allowing the reader to develop an understanding of their content, power, and ecstasy. The authors of these invocations were well versed with the I am principle, employing it extensively. However, it was not used alone, as we will discover. I will reserve the discussion of this subject for a future chapter, where I will aim to describe it in detail.